what drew us together?
Well, I was I was in Dallas and I saw Adrienne online, and obviously she's very captivating, and she has a great smile, and then when I started talking to her, I realized how intelligent she was and all of her gifts she had, and I just couldn't stop talking to her, and I still can't. So here we are.
It's awesome. I was drawn to you because I was coming out of a really toxic relationship, and I think like the pendulum always swings, and I was looking for somebody. The relationship that I had before my last relationship was like a guy that was way too nice, and he cheated on me. And then there was a guy that was not super nice, but he was loyal to me. And I think understanding how I swung from one pendulum to the other, looking to not have the same experience that I'd had in the past relationship, you were kind of like that middle ground where I knew you were really loyal. I knew that you were somebody who had a lot of character, a lot of integrity with everything that you did and said. But also you were really nice, and it felt so safe to me. And obviously you're very aesthetically pleasing. So that was kind of why I was drawn to you.
Thank you.
But we started out just talking on the phone. So I wasn't super interested in a relationship. I was actually coming out of about like a year and a half long anniversary since my dad's passing. And I was definitely at the peak of my depression. I was pretty physically unhealthy. I was binge eating a lot. I just had a lot of shadows and demons that I didn't even have the resources to know how to look at. So I really was just looking for somebody that could make me feel better and make me want to get out of bed in the morning. And then there's obviously unconscious reasons for why we're looking for people as well, which we'll definitely highlight throughout this whole little journey. But for the most part, it just felt really right. We stayed up fucking 4 hours, literally almost every night, and you had work. We stayed up a lot late doing FaceTime calls, phone calls. He was calling me in between like every single time he had clients, and we were just connecting at night. And it was a cool conversation. I've never had conscious conversations or conversations that were at this level with a man that it felt like, wow, we're like talking about real stuff. We're talking about the things that I personally had never talked about in a relationship before, like really where I wanted to go in life, and not just where I wanted to go, but like you would always ask me like why, and you would point out little things about me that that you like that were endearing, or you would point out things about me that other people had said were like too much, like your personality's too strong, you're too much, you're too loud, and you would always compliment me on those things.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was like something that was so special to me. I'd never experienced that in a relationship before.
Well, it's just what I felt, so.
Yeah. It's great.
It's true though.
Yeah. So of course we had a couple of those experiences where I was feeling that way, and whatever you were feeling in that time just felt really right. And even though we were both coming out of relationships that were really really had just ended like a couple months before that, I did the craziest thing you could do, and I packed up all my stuff and I moved from Texas to Utah 2 months after meeting Tommy. And there starts the beginning of our journey. So I think the biggest thing to highlight in this season is perception versus reality. One, perception through long distance, through a phone, and then through the lens of somebody who is hurting, through the lens of somebody who's looking for a placeholder, right? Like I was looking for a placeholder for my dad. I was looking for a placeholder for all the things inside myself that I wasn't able to give myself. And what do you think you were looking for at that time?
Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything. I was just got out of a 3-year relationship with an Olympian. I wanted a break. I thought I was going to be Bachelor of the Year, successful, just started a business. I wasn't looking for anything, honestly. And so for me, when I see things, it's all about, what my intuition, and something about that just pulled me toward you, and it just kept going, and we just aligned in so many ways, and I felt just grateful to be where I was at, and so it began.
Let's talk about my masks.
Sure. Like what in particular?
Let's talk about all the many masks that I had when you met me. The defense mechanisms, the control issues, the way that I projected myself out into the world, but what you saw behind closed doors.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate everything about Adrienne and all her power that she has, and I just saw so many different qualities, and unfortunately there was that many different masks for like those qualities and situations, and I think um, she just wanted to grow though, and in whatever way, and I really appreciated that in every way. It was like almost like when you see a little kid and they just want to do something, and you can tell they're going to do it. It just takes time, and so for me, I tried to have as much patience as possible, and just appreciate those moments. But you know, the growing pains. I mean, it's always super challenging, especially when I'm older than Adrienne, and so I felt we were going through different things at different times, and even from age, and I don't want to say age, but just experience and different life experiences have you react to certain things in a certain way, and we're also trying to like figure out how to live with each other, and going from like seeing each other a few times, spending a lot of time on the phone, to like literally coexisting, plus add the business portion on top of it, which is the whole other thing.
It's a whole thing. Yeah. So when did you know you were in love with me? What was like the moment?
Oh, is that one of their questions or yours?
What do you mean?
That's a valid point.
What do you mean?
Is that your question or is that theirs?
I know the answer to this. How many times have I asked you this question? I know the answer to this.
Oh.
Validate me. No, this is one of their many questions. The questions are interwoven.
Okay, so basically, I mean, there's quite a few times, like there's things about, I think, people, but Adrienne especially, that you can love her for multiple things, and I would say probably the first time, there's moments of that when the first time you came here, and then plus before that when I was on the phone, so I can't say one time. Yeah.
I remember one call in particular where we were up just all night long, and I remember being like, he must be the one, because I just want to listen to you talk all the time. And I was like so curious about you, and most of the time in my past relationships it was mostly just like me talking.
Yeah.
I would attract like really shy men. So that's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's funny is one of the things I wrote on here was how you always knew that I was really talented and really special in ways that I, like I said, in ways that I saw as like shadows, right? So you were like the first person to take these shadows that I had and kind of be like, no, these are skills. This is like talent, raw talent. And I always appreciated that. I appreciated the shit out of that, because I grew up having such a difficult time inserting myself in places without like overly inserting myself, or people hung out with me and I knew why they hung out with me. It was either because like, I had lots of toys. I had like the coolest toys out of all my friends, I felt like, and my house was really cool, and my parents were really lenient. And so to have somebody that sees these things about me that I've kind of been talked behind my back about, and at that time was really something special to me. And so on that's on the light side of like what really made me feel all the things that I felt when I was with you, and made me feel like you were going to be a really good partner for me. And then on the shadow side of really why yours and my partnership lasted for what I would say longer than maybe it should have, was just the fact that on an unconscious level at the time, repeating patterns from my childhood, trying to reconcile the things that I was never able to reconcile with my dad. One of those things being that I seek out men that put me above their boundaries. In order for me to feel loved and validated in my relationship with my father, it was very much like I could have anything that I wanted. No, I didn't know what no meant. I didn't receive no a lot, and it was always like I could get whatever I wanted out of him. As a kid, you don't see what you're doing. You don't know your manipulation. Usually, our own manipulation is the one that comes to catch us at the end, that we didn't know about. And so, you definitely had a lot of those qualities as well. Somebody who didn't specifically have strong boundaries, didn't really know what boundary work was. We learned that together through therapy, and you wanted to please me. You wanted me to be happy. You wanted me to feel good, and you did that a lot of the times at the expense of yourself. And so that was definitely one thing. I also had a shit relationship with money when I met you. Like, what is money? Where does it come from? I had jobs, I had started businesses, but as far as like having money in my account and being cognizant of like where it's moving to, what I'm paying for, why I'm paying for it, and like how I'm going to return that money into my account or grow that money, those were not conversations I was even remotely willing to have. That was probably like the last taboo shadow that I had. And what's so funny is like in my life, attachment style, like how I project myself in relationships is usually very anxious. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Is everything okay? Like, I can tell something's not okay. Your energy's changed. What's going on, right? And that's like between me being anxious from my childhood of my dynamic with my dad, and then also me being an empath and being able to feel, what you're feeling, and you being extremely avoidant, which the only thing I'm ever avoidant with was money. So that was such an interesting relationship for you to see me have an avoidant relationship with something, and how I just like avoided conversations at all costs. And so the first part of our relationship, you paid for pretty much everything. I was working for you. We had a business that we were building together. It's really your business and your concept and your dream, and it was something that I really believed in, and I did put a lot of work into it, and in my own way, and through learning through myself, I learned a lot about myself there. But the money thing specifically was always really challenging because we had this business together. You were like the boss, but you never really wanted to be the boss. You just wanted to do it together. Like, you just really wanted us to be friends and running partners. And I, from the time I met you, always saw you as a mentor. It's really hard, and I think that's where the peak of our relationship happened, was where I started to really catch up to you in some of these concepts, and we started to really be allies like we are now. But that part of our relationship, I would say, was the hardest for me. The two things: one, working for you, having such a poor relationship with money, not knowing how to communicate what my financial needs were, you pretty much meeting my financial needs without us even having a conversation about it. So it's just like this imaginary thing in the corner that neither one of us looked at, and you're feeling, all the ways that you felt about spending all of that money, and not necessarily feeling like I'm doing what I can to provide for us and to compensate, and me feeling a little bit used because I was working for you and I wouldn't take money because I didn't feel like I earned money, but I would do things and I would work all the time that I wouldn't have any money to gratify me with. And we didn't speak about it. So that was, to me, the number one, I would say, like, that was to me one of the hardest parts of our relationship. What do you think? Cool. What do you think was the...
What else you got on there? What are the magic you guys are asking me?
You get to go first.
Where's this going?
You get to go first.
Go first on what?
On what do you think was like just the part of our relationship that was the hardest, the most challenging, yeah.
I mean, for me, I know that people aren't truly happy unless they're doing something that they're connected to, and for me, I just wanted Adrienne to be able to find like what that was for her, what drove her, and then made her feel whole. And I feel like at the beginning of our relationship, it was more about gathering like pieces along the way to, the tools to find, what that was. And when you're doing that, in a relationship, growing a business, there's just different things there that are growing at different times. And so that would probably be the biggest challenge, because, just both where we were as a couple, coming out of like two dynamic relationships, and then adjoining like the power that, each you have alone and I have alone plus together it's just polars, and it can be really hard, but honestly the most of it worked, and it was great.
Mm-hmm.
But when that lightning strikes.
Am I the lightning?
Yeah, could be. I mean, the greatest weapons have to be figured out how to be calibrated and,
Amen.
actually used the right way, whatever that is. And I think, as we grow older, I mean, actually, every day we're trying to figure out what that means for all of us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, what were y'all's biggest challenges in the relationship? And I think the biggest challenge, maybe for us collectively together versus like the separate stuff, was really just the anxious avoidant dynamic that we had going on, which was, if we're breaking it down based on a trauma response and why we were projecting ourselves this way, was, I'm used to the chaos of my dynamic with my dad, which was so beautiful in so many ways because it was, the relationship that helped cultivate so much of what I am and so much of my fire. But it was really this dynamic of my dad would become triggered. He had a little bit of PTSD, and that triggering, as an empath, I would feel that feeling, and then I would prepare myself for whatever was to come, which was usually mostly just like verbal violence and him just being triggered and him feeling scared and unstable. And as a child, that type of response was, I felt responsible when my dad was triggered, and I also felt responsible for pulling him out of that triggering situation, which, although is very scary, is also very thrilling. It's a very thrilling cycle because there is relief at the end, right? It's like that pain-pleasure combo where we fight and we say nasty things and it gets drawn out, but at the end, here we are like loving on each other. And it's like, wow, that's, to me as a child, that's real love, is to be able to go to these hard places together, to have this conflict, to be able to scream and yell and show, each other what you're made of and show each other your worst, and then come back together like nothing ever happened. That is definitely not your story from childhood, right? So you have your own, and I think how that dynamic plays is I was constantly chasing conflict with you in order to feel loved and validated. And you saw that come up a lot where I would start on something that really had nothing to do with anything, and I was just kind of pulling thread, and it was like the next thing you knew we were downriver on something that was real for me, and there was screaming, and I would even bring you to places that you would always say, like, I don't go to these places, you're the only one that can take me here. And it was just that, like, I was looking for love in something familiar. And then your attachment style, which is avoidant, is really hard for someone who's looking for conflict and who's looking for, that fight, because I come at you and you just avoid. And so there was so many moments where,
I would rather fix something than
or just be like, it's not a big deal, and just kind of let it go. And but I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for the fight and the resolution to feel whole, right? And so even there would be times where I would try to have a conversation with you, and you would just be like, it's not a big deal, like you're fine, you're right, but that still wasn't enough for me. And so I would still go, and then you would create more avoidance, because just trying to whatever makes me happy, right? That people pleasing, like whatever's gonna make everything go. And I'd love for you to talk about like how you saw that show up.
So what do you mean?
Just the anxious avoidant dynamic.
I have all these thoughts flowing through my head right now. So I think when you have like multiple things going on at once, and like when you're trying to grow and then you have challenges, sometimes it would feel easier to not blow something up more than it was, and that's just based on opinion. It's not even a fact. Like, so that was my reaction, growing the business. And then in my story, it was, I felt like I was trying to help you to get to wherever you were wanting to go, and we were doing it together. But there's just a lot of challenge within all that. So if you have challenges in multiple places, it makes life really tough to stay balanced or feel joyful throughout. So there'd be times where I would just be like, okay, this is fine, and then when we had to talk something out, we talked it out. But eventually those walls break down, right? Because someone like you like needs that. And I appreciated you in so many ways that I was willing to figure out how to communicate those challenges and be able to actually get to a place where we're at now, where we can talk about anything and you actually feel safe in the container that we built versus the opposite. So it's quite a journey, though. Lots of ripping and tearing.
Oh. Was there ever a moment, a realization where you knew that I was not the one? Like, was there a moment where you knew that our romantic relationship was not what it should be, or not what you wanted?
Yeah, so like for me, my view on the one, or whatever our definition of culture says that is, like I've fallen in love where I felt like it was the one more than once in my life. And you had all of those feelings for me, like all the feelings that were speaking to me, like that's how it was with you. And so but as time went on, all of those pieces like weren't connected in all the ways that society had told me that, hey, this was supposed to be the one. So obviously you're starting to work out, your brain's telling you about, oh, these pieces aren't lined up and these pieces are. And that's where like relationship becomes confusing, because you can't direct yourself between culture standards, like what your spirit wants, and your ego. Like, to me, those three voices speaking to me, and it's almost like a sneak attack. And so for me, I had moments where, yes, I absolutely felt that you weren't, and I was these other pieces I was in need of, and then all these others were fulfilled. And immediately, like I believe in our society, we're told that, if this or this isn't there, then you shouldn't even be with them, is sometimes what our advice is. But the thing is what your soul is telling you is this is a great person. Like, why would you not want them in your life? Like, why does it have to be a category?
And I also see it as like, your soul doesn't have judgment, right? It's like that of God. And so it's attracting not only the light that you see in others, but it's also attracting the shadows that you see in others, because you're looking to heal from the wounds that you have. And the only way for you to heal from those wounds is for them to resurface. So sometimes we attract partners that we know are going to create trauma for us, or going to resurface trauma that, has been unresolved. And so I think, we know that there was a little bit of that, both of those in our relationship, like this beautiful light that drew me to you, like the light that you are still in my life, the stability that you are in my life, that grounding that I feel when I'm with you. And then the shadow side too, the painful moments of our relationship that honestly healed me, because you were grounding enough and you were safe enough for me to, have these things resurface, recognize that you're not making me feel a certain way. I already felt that way. You're just here to be a messenger of that thing. And then I felt safe, like, for us to come together and for me to be in truth about it. And I think like one of the questions that they asked is, what is different now in your relationship versus what was different then? And there's fucking so many things. But the number one thing for me was, when we were together, we had placed so much importance, or I had placed so much importance on how you perceived me, and I wanted acknowledgement, and I wanted specific validation, and anything that didn't meet those standards really just felt like a personal attack to me. And so I would have all this hurt inside of me that I want to share with you. And for you, being somebody who has done so much for me and so much to make me happy, to hear how unhappy I am, I remember you sometimes being like, your perception is wrong. And you were right, it was wrong a lot of times. But what I was looking for was not for you to be right or for me to be wrong, but for me to be heard.
Yeah.
And for me to feel like you were willing to listen to me, even if I was wrong.
Yeah.
And try to help me identify why I was wrong, without it being like the mentor space, like the teacher, right? And I think when our relationship took the most impactful turn for the best was when we recognized each other as the teacher and recognized ourselves as students and could just sit and love each other and not need to be acknowledged or to be right to the other person. Like I no longer hold all this weight of you seeing me in this specific light because I don't have this attachment anymore to how you see me because we're no longer lovers. So like when we were lovers, when we were together, we were boyfriend, girlfriend, when we were talking about a future together, I needed so badly for you to see me a certain way because it was the only way that I thought I was lovable to be seen. It's how other men had seen me, and it's all the collective moments that men had told me that I was great, that I had forged together to be this person, right?
Yeah.
And it's fucking impossible to keep up with. Like it was impossible. And that's what we talked about, like all the masks that I had when I came with you. Like I knew my powers in small increments, and I knew exactly what men were looking for when they were seeking me out, like the power and, the charm and all these different things that I'd always been complimented on, except for because I didn't let them arise organically, because I was placing them and manipulating everything around me in order to create this experience for other people, not even for myself, I got lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
And that was really the whole beginning of our relationship, is me lost in the sauce, very depressed, but so much shame around depression. I didn't even know what it was. I just thought I was, kind of a lazy piece of shit. I had a hard time getting out of bed. And then too, what I was doing was very purpose driven, but my reasons for doing it were not for my soul's purpose, but because I wanted you to love me and accept me and acknowledge me. And you did all those things. You just didn't do them the way I wanted them done.
Yeah.
And so it's so crazy to think back, but I went for most of our relationship thinking that you really didn't love me, that you wanted me to be someone that I wasn't. And the whole time, and this is really true for everyone, like when we stepped back and when I stepped back, I recognized that you really just wanted me to be whoever the fuck I was, whoever that was, and just like figure out who it was and stop like trying to be what you're not.
Yeah.
And I never heard that from you because I couldn't hold the space either. I couldn't sit down and listen to what you had to say because I was too busy looking for that validation, from you. So I think that's really for me where our relationship kind of took a different turn. And that happened even really before we ended our relationship. I mean, the part of our story that I think is like the sauciest is, all the many attempts that I made of trying to salvage the pieces that I felt like were falling apart of our relationship. I had never really experienced intimacy before in my life with really anyone other than my dad. I'd experienced intimacy in the sense that like I could talk to him about anything and I didn't feel, that's intimacy to me, is like being able to share truth with someone and be fully received in your truth, no matter how crazy or out of alignment it is with religion or education or society. And I had that with my dad. And when he was gone, I definitely didn't have that with women at all at the time. And I would have pieces of that with men, but usually men that I didn't really care how they viewed me, right? So guy friends. And it's funny thinking back, like that's probably why my guy friends had feelings for me, because they were getting to see these real authentic sides of me, these sides of me that weren't being masked and like just in truth. And I didn't have that with you at the beginning of our relationship. I didn't even know what my truth was, and by the time I started figuring it out, it was a little bit of a major threat to our relationship and to our business mostly. And so having these intimacy issues and you as well having your challenges around intimacy, it was a perfect storm for us to hide our intimacy challenges in. I didn't have to worry about talking about my intimacy issues because I knew you had them and I knew that you didn't want to talk about yours. So if you don't want to talk about yours and I don't want to talk about mine, we are a perfect combo in that arena. And so I would say we share, some of the questions on here is like, what does y'all's relationship look like now? And I would say our relationship now has more intimacy than it's ever had. but not sexual, right? The other questions are you guys, do you guys still make out? Are you guys sleeping together during quarantine? And the answer to both these questions is no, we're not. We're not doing either of those things. I think as of right now, that's a really strong boundary for both of us. I'm still healing a lot of my intimacy stuff, and also dating outside. You know, I have some long distance relationships kind of moving and going on that are pretty casual, and I don't know if you want to address your dating life.
Yeah. It's been about getting to know myself and what that is, and I'm just being really patient and not necessarily looking, but looking like within. But any chance that I get to, you know, date somebody, I want to, you know, give them who I am and see what comes back as a mirror. And it's fascinating to be able to, you know, just get to know people on a deeper level, especially like with the lens that Adrian and I created, and the feelings of safety and communication, and just understanding what holding space means in general, and just hearing people on an intimate level and not just like a professional level.
Yeah,
it's been really nice.
Yeah, it has. All right, so what I was getting to, like roundabout, this always happens, tangents. Yeah. The sauciest part of our relationship was last year I joined a mastermind group. I was looking for community. I was really looking for community with women. I really, you know, the intimacy stuff wasn't going to get fixed. I was in a monogamous traditional relationship with somebody who had intimacy issues. I was looking for a way to heal that version of myself and to really have deep connection with people, and women obviously made sense. So as I started diving into intimacy with my best friend Ciara and some of the other girlfriends in our group, you know, just sharing our truth together and talking about our challenges and talking about our deepest fears and the things that are so vulnerable that you can't even speak them without, you know, crying. That was the connection I was ultimately looking for with my partner and then within myself. And one of the things that I came across as far as resources go is like, you know, how to really do trauma healing, how to really mend the pieces of yourself, like what kind of medicine work, what kind of dynamics can you be in, what kind of situations. And after, you know, all the self-help books I was reading, I was really looking for something a little more unconventional, and that's when I came across Open Relationship. Thank you very much, Aubrey Marcus and Whitney Miller. You guys really sparked and started a whole journey inside my life that has brought forth most of the wounding that I've ever had, and also given me a lot of resources and a good environment to be able to really look at myself under a magnifying glass and begin to heal some of those things. And so although Open Relationship did not work for us, I would definitely say on my end, it was one of the most powerful healing tools that I had with you, and to get us to the point where we're at right now. And that being because whatever, you know, definition you want to use as far as open relationship goes, some people will take it to the extreme. They will automatically assume, you know, the absolute worst. Some people will just say, like, you just want to fuck a lot of people. And for some people that's true. And if that's your truth, like, I fully support that. For me though, I was looking for deep connection. That's what I was wanting, and I couldn't get that inside my relationship. So ultimately I wanted to have the opportunity to share intimacy and connection, whether that be with sex or without sex. Like, you get to choose, and that's really the whole point of what we're trying to bring, is you get to choose and you get to create the very unique, specific container that fits for you and whatever person that you are in a relationship with, whether that is platonic, you know, whether that's consensual sex, whether that's whatever. That's what we were looking to do, is just to have something a little bit more custom that catered to our needs. And then I also was looking to have some sexual experiences to help me heal from some of the sexual trauma that I had been through. And so I offered up this on a platter. Hey, what do you think about opening our relationship? And I think you weren't really for it or against it. You were kind of like, I don't really have a lot of data. It's I mean, it seems like, I think the first time I brought up the conversation, you were like, is this a trap? Like, why are you asking me about this? But yeah, you know what, you know, I know what my experiences were during Open, kind of leading the way very blindly, and dragging you with me. And and me being anxious, is everything okay? And then going back to the avoidant of like kind of just leaving the conversation alone so that it didn't spark into a fight. But maybe you can share a little about your experience.
Sure. Well, um, if you guys don't know Adrienne, she's gonna do what she feels and she's gonna accomplish what she wants, no matter what. And that is something that I know and appreciate about her. So anything that she wants to experience, that's just what's gonna happen. It's a manifestation for sure. And um, opening it, it was more about, what did you need to grow and figure out like who you were.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to support you in that venture, honestly. To me, I'm a focused businessman and coach, so that's really outside of my relationships, and life. Like that's mostly what I focus on. So I didn't want to rock my world so that the rest of my world would be affected, and it was definitely rocked. Like
Definitely.
I had to look at my ego, and I had to look inward, and it was one of the most painful experiences, but it was also that's growth. Like everything, growth is usually attached to some form of pain or some form of cocooning in some way. So I started to notice after a little bit of time that it was actually helping me, and so I started to embrace versus like kind of segment myself. Like, okay, you're over here, I'm over here. I'm gonna stay protected. You're gonna do your thing, but the opposite is inevitable. Like, there's no way that it's impossible to do. So I was forced to grow, and I don't ever shy away from growth, and when I see something that you or I can utilize to get to know ourselves or whatever, I'm down. And so I started to see certain things about me. I started to um, feel almost younger every day, and just to treat myself better and better, find myself more balanced, understand what it meant to hear what your needs were versus like cultural monogamy, like, oh, you should be this every day, kind of thought process. And so afterwards, or I mean, say throughout, like it was just kind of a journey of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the next question actually goes perfect with that. It's, what do you think you could have done, to save the relationship or fix the relationship? And first and foremost, there was nothing to save. I love our relationship where it was. Everything that we went through together and where we are now is, to me, my ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, like, any time that you get this idea of like something unconventional, which is pretty much my life path, a lot of times I want to dive headfirst into it. And I wish that I had practiced the principles of open relationship without actually opening our relationship to sexual experiences. I think what I wish that I had done better is just saying and stating, hey, like, I'm really lacking connection, and I want to have permission to seek it with other people, without and excluding sexual experiences. If I want to go to coffee with a man or a woman that I find to be stimulating and that makes me feel, the way that I'm looking to feel, that connected feeling, that appreciated feeling. And I think just being able to recognize and go, just even remember that my partner is a whole person outside of me and I'm a whole person outside of them, and that you're allowed to experience pleasure outside of our relationship. Again, with the exception of sex, like maybe that should have been, the thing that I wish that I had done, and that I would probably do moving forward in other relationships. If I decide to and choose to be monogamous with my partner, is that I will decide how the boundaries grow. Not having rules that can be broken, but having boundaries that can be stretched and expanded or contracted, for safety reasons. And we didn't have fucking boundaries. We didn't even know what that meant. So there was no way for us to draw those lines. And instead we just dove headfirst and kind of popped it open as wide as possible, which definitely created a lot of trauma, which is harder to heal. It's if you're creating real-time trauma, then the open relationship no longer becomes an opportunity for you to do healing from before. It just becomes another pit of pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I feel like that's where I made my mistake, was not allowing the openness and the context to be that is safe enough for us to also do healing and unpacking in real time, versus like perpetuating what we already had, which was like resentment and miscommunication and all these different things. So that's on
Except
my
I can't
end.
imagine anybody doing these kind of things perfectly. Where's
No.
the rule book on this stuff?
There's no rule book. Oh, all right. So a couple other questions that we had is, was there a sense of loneliness once we separated?
So I didn't even answer the question at all.
Which one?
The one before that.
What do you think you would do differently to like save or fix the relationship?
To save or fix. Well, the not obvious answer is that I'm doing something every day to save or fix the relationship. I feel like we've done everything, from counseling, spending tons of money on that, showing up for that, talking through things, enduring whatever it is that we had to endure in the process, opening the relationship, which I never thought that would be something I'd do in my life, just in general, to breaking up, to trying to figure out how to be friends, because when you love every relationship you have to love them. So how did you get to where you don't love them, is my philosophy, or what I found in this process. And I was trying to figure out, like, why do I have to like completely lose this person when I'm drawn to her more as a friend, as a family member, as a loved one that I would never want to lose. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I showed up, I think, in every way, and then that's why we're sitting here together, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. You don't have to not see someone just because you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
The invisible rules say that that's not allowed. Like, a lot of the girls I've dated have had serious problems with Adrian being around, like serious threats, like just the feeling of threat. Even though I would voice it, I would completely play out the scenario the way it was, or is, I should say. And but then there's healing in that too. Like, I've had those girls tell me, like, oh, this is these moments were good for me, because I've seen this and this, and I've grew this and this, and then they're on the path of figuring it out, which is really cool to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different. I feel like men at the beginning are like, open relationship, fuck yeah, let's go. And so I don't have as much of an issue out of the gate, as much as like, later on, where the masculinity and the comparison and things come in. But there's definitely challenges on both sides. Opening our relationship showed a lot to both of us about each other, about ourselves, and definitely gave us some insight as to like what we were needing to heal inside of each other. So back to that other question was,
sure. And where I stand, like, I'm not sure if I'm on either side, monogamy or open. What I am on the side of is constantly learning, good communication, being open to new ideas, and living a life that is like spirit drawn, and not like a rule that we learned from our parents, or like something we heard like on TV when we were a kid. So no lines.
Yeah. Was there a sense of loneliness after you ended the romance of your relationship?
Yeah, because you feel like you just feel like you're never gonna be able to get any joy out of that relationship again. I think. Like, that was my natural reaction. So, but obviously by reworking so many different containers, it's like lifting weights. um, you can kind of feel like you're developing something else, and I think that's where we're at, to where we're constantly redeveloping like what that container looks like, into like, oh, this person is like my best friend. I do, you know, anything for this person, and I congratulate them, you know, lift them up, whatever that is, without, you know, without lines, which is nice.
Yeah, I love that analogy. So what does the like lifting weights look like? Like, you know, give an example maybe of what that.
Well, just anything that, you know, any bridge you have to cross anything that brings you challenge, like in your life. Just because you feel sadness doesn't mean it's not great for you. Just because if you cry, we're taught to not cry. I think you should cry. I think that we should feel every single thing, because without joy, there's not sadness, and vice versa. So
when I think about like actually lifting weights and the resistance of the weight, like the first time you lift that resistance, you like don't trust your own body. You know what I mean? So you do it, and it's like scary and it's terrifying, and you know, if you don't go into it with confidence, like you're gonna get fucked up. But in these moments, like you and I both like dove in straight into the resistance, and each time the weight has been a little heavier, we've also created more trust within ourselves. And so that's where that boundary really comes in, is like, you know, you need boundaries for the places that you're like unsure of what it looks like to lift that resistance. And then once you have a familiar pattern with that resistance and you kind of know how you want to show up, then all of a sudden you can start to expand those boundaries together, like you and I have. Where I can come over to your house and I can bring friends over now, you know, whereas the beginning when we first broke up, that was very triggering for you, because you felt like I just kind of thought I owned your life and I could just come over whenever I wanted to. And you know, and that was part of the bleeding, the bleeding between our codependent lifestyle and we're not together anymore, but we're still codependent lifestyle, which was fun. You know, that lasted for a couple months, and then there was definitely some boundaries expressed around that space. And that's, you know, one of the other questions is, you know, what boundaries do you guys have? And I think for me, I'm still learning about boundaries and I'm building those boundaries in real time. But you know, just the other night I expressed a boundary for me right now is not working with you professionally. And it's really hard and it's really painful, because I feel like we're meant to create so many beautiful things together, but it doesn't mean we can't in the future. It's just the space that I'm in right now, which is still healing from all the judgment that I placed on myself and all of the wounds that I had around not feeling good enough for you ever, or not feeling like I could ever measure up to what you expected of me. I could never work as hard as you. And so, you know, those wounds were mine. They weren't things that you gave to me, but they were definitely things that were resurfaced in our relationship, especially in the office together. Yeah. And so just looking at that now as still something that comes up for me, right? The other night we were making dinner in the kitchen, and you brought up something about work, and I said, I don't know why, but my nervous system, you know, my body language, my nervous system, just reacting really, really negatively to whatever you said. And we just sat there and I did deep breathing, and we just brought some things to the surface of like how I was feeling at that time that I didn't know how to express and didn't know how to get to. And then you being a place where you don't need to defend and say, well, I never made you feel that way. That's wrong. You just sat there and you really listened to how I must have felt at that time. And I think I could feel you thinking back to those moments and recognizing that the way that I was projecting myself onto you can almost heal, because you see that as my pain too. And we did breaths together in the kitchen. I fucking cried my eyes out. And it was a very, very healing experience for us. Yeah. That was before quarantine even started.
Yeah, I think that's probably just going back to the value of what we've done is, you know, when you break up with people, you push them away as far as you can, because like that pain like hurts, like you're no good, this, that, whatever. What if we could shift it to where, no, let's actually figure this out to where we can actually work on the trauma that we had or created or whatever, because we once felt safe together to be able to do so. And it was this interesting experience where it was very euphoric, to where she was healing, and then something she said ricocheted at me, and then I was like, okay, what is this in me? I feel something now, and why do I need to go back and hold on to anything that is even revolved around that idea or thought that we just crossed over. So that's my favorite part about this, honestly.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What way did each of you feel triggered? That was. Did you guys take space after ending your relationship? Yes and no. Our relationship for like 6 months was kind of like we weren't together because we had both said things like we can see that this is not what it should be, but we never like sat down and had like a breakup. I remember taking you out to pizza one day and being like telling you that I knew that the relationship was over, and this was by far one of the craziest experiences.
We had a few breakups.
Yeah, but this one, the pizza shop one was the craziest experience of my life because it was the first time I had really decided that I knew we weren't supposed to be together, and I knew that by staying with you, I was being selfish and I was going to hinder both of our growth process. So I get the courage, inside of me to go and to have this conversation, and knowing that you would probably perceive me as abandoning you, and it was like even not being able to cope with that and hoping you perceived me this certain way. I did the hard thing. I had the conversation. I said, I know that our relationship romantically isn't going anywhere, and I want to be friends, but I know that this needs to change. And you cried and I cried, and then you looked at me and you were like, can we go back to the house and have a good day now?
Mm-hmm.
Which is pretty much what you said to me every time we ever fought. And it just like in that moment it made me realize like, oh my God, all of your love for me was not conditional upon me working for you and building the life with you that you wanted. It was never about that. That was just the judgment that I was placing on myself. Like the only way that this person could love me is if I'm checking all these boxes. And meanwhile, the boxes that you're checking for me are completely different. Yeah. And then we got home, I made us some food. I was sitting, I don't know if you remember this, I was sitting in the living room floor, and all of a sudden I looked over at you and we were laughing so hard about something, and I felt just this immense amount of gratitude followed by an immense amount of sadness at the same time. And remember I told you I felt like my body was being ripped into every emotion, and I felt like my whole chest was going to split open. And that was like one of the most visceral experiences of my life. And from that moment, that was just one small piece of what it felt like to know that this person might actually love me no matter how I show up. Like they, or they might love me regardless of if I paint the perfect picture that they had in store. And so that was really intense.
Yeah.
And then the space that we really took was, when our landlord texted us and said, hey, I need to sell the house you guys live in. And I knew in that moment that it was really make or break. And that was in September. That was either we move in again together and we continue these patterns that we have, having had these conversations and just completely negating the fact that we knew that the romantic portion of our relationship was over, or, I could do the things that I've been wanting to do forever and create some space. And so I took off and I chose to go to Bali and hit the road and do a nomadic thing. And you moved into this beautiful house solo to kind of start not really rebuilding, but just building the next phase, right?
Yeah. What a phase it's been.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to no longer feel the pain of the relationship coming up in conversation, either with other people or together?
Well, there's so many different feelings of pain from like the opening of the relationship to like all these other things along the way, realizing that there were pieces that didn't work and weren't ever gonna, fuse into place like everybody kind of dreams they would. And so I felt like a lot of that work was done like the last, whatever percentage of that time was, and then, the breakup. And then figuring out how to be friends again still felt somewhat, of that, that same pain that you would if you were, losing someone or not going to be with someone anymore. So.
Do you feel like that was tied to that unconditional love idea? Like that if you weren't pleasing me and doing all the things that you had done for me before, that maybe you would find out I never really loved you, and that if I wasn't able to check all the boxes for you anymore, maybe then I would find out you never really loved me. And so then you would say, go away. If we can't be together, I don't want you in my life. That was my fear was.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't mine. But I was just trying to keep an open mind and just see what happened. And I knew that whatever was, right feeling, then that would lead the way.
You and I are so different, and I don't know why I'm still trying to guess what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I have never been able to. And I love that about you.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Surprising.
All right, so is there still attraction or sexual tension between the two of you? This is a juicy question.
Adrian's attraction, I think, has always been deeply energetic. And I'm learning about what that means now recently, but so her energy is what fuels me, not her, I don't know, my wanting to mate with her. I can't even categorize this. I don't think I ever have. My appreciation for who she is what attracts me to her. So when I look at her, I don't feel like I want to mate with her. I can't explain it. I just appreciate her like when you appreciate a piece of art like Da Vinci or a Greek god, when you're looking at that statue and that creation, and I'm in awe. And I love to watch her growth. That's something that I'm a big fan of. And so I'm excited to be a spectator and also part of it all. So that's how I feel.
It's so interesting because no one ever really talks about the relationships where sex kind of fails, or sex isn't necessarily the centerpiece of that relationship. Because I have so many friends that when I would talk to them about our intimacy challenges, they would say oh, I could never do that. And it's well, I was in a relationship with someone where we had bomb sex and that's about it. And I did stay in that relationship for longer than I should have, but also with you and I, it was almost 90% of it was everything, and then that lacking was just that small 10%, and it wasn't even a big deal when everything else was so flourishing. And so I think for me,
we're just taught that some pieces are, that's what intimacy is.
Yeah.
And then we figure out, well, hopefully we end up figuring out, hey, this isn't it.
Well, and we feel guilty, based on society, if we can't make this one piece work, we failed. And the only way we failed is if we had put very specific labels, and that's the next question is, if there was no concept of social structure that existed, such as lovers, friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, would you guys consider yourself still being together? And we've talked about this, absolutely together in the sense of we fucking hate the word ex, and we only use it because, people have emotional responses to that word. But I've never seen you as a boyfriend. I've always seen you as family. I've always seen you as an ally, somebody that would be in my life forever, somebody that I could call on, regardless of what happens, how long time goes between us. And so when I introduce you now, it's you're Tommy, you're part of my family. And so parts of our relationship are as platonic as can be, and then there's other parts where there's flashes for me, of obviously sexual attraction, and especially when you dance and when you're free and we connect on those levels. But but yeah, I think I stopped looking at it as a missing piece or something that was broken in our relationship, and just started appreciating it for what it was, which was pretty much everything else that I could ever want in a friend and in somebody that I would consider family.
Yeah, definitely. I still have moments of heightens of love feelings towards you. So I definitely have. I think you called it flashes, and it's great to feel that appreciation and look back that could have easily been crushed a long time ago. and I'm not going to go into past relationships of mine, but it's interesting to see how it can be versus like how, I don't know if it's supposed to be or whatever that is. So anyway, I hope this has been okay for you guys. We're obviously airing it out, and I'm not usually, as Adrian knows, the first person to put his personal stuff like out there, because I think a lot of that's intimate. But at the same time, this is 2020, right? So any kind of medicine like I can get, I love, I learn from all kinds of people. So whatever I can do to show up and just talk about, my challenges and if you can take one nugget and, apply it to your own life, like I'm definitely willing to do that and sit on this couch. And where were you on the night of? So happy quarantine. And,
You think I'm going to drag you into a few more of these over time?
I'm sure. 100%. I'm sure there's a lot more you want to pull out of there.
We'll wrestle with it later. Who knows? Thank you guys so much if you made it all the way to the end of this video. If it wasn't juicy enough for you, let me know what you were looking for, because
She